Grant.
the hell was that?
That was the pot. That was Craig.
Craig says that?
He says now recording.
Is that picked up in the recording?
No.
So they just get my confused and dazed reaction to that.
Yes.
Okay, Craig. Well,
Yeah.
it's your podcast.
It's my podcast.
Give it a proper send off.
Yeah. Well, Potato Man is out in Virginia raising cane, and I haven't uploaded anything in a while. So Grant here suggested, hey, we should talk about Schrader or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, Paul Schrader. We could get easily 11 hours out of that.
I hope so. Hello. So hi everyone. I'm GF Savages of GF Savages fame. I'm
The
kind
great
of a
GF
celebrity.
Savages. Yes.
I'm a revolutionary editor. I'm really going to change the world of film. I have a bunch of great ideas. No one takes me seriously. I like to think I'm a bit of a genius.
Right.
At least Craig agrees with me.
Craig agrees. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about Schrader. And before we start off, I just want to lay out my familiarity with him.
Go off.
So I would not describe myself as a super fan of him in any capacity, but I have had a considerable interest in American New Wave, and obviously him being one of the most influential writers of that late period, I have familiarized myself with the first 5 films of his career and a lot of the scripts he wrote from that time.
Right.
I've seen everything from Blue Collar to Mishima, and that includes things like the Yakuza. I also have seen things like Mosquito Coast, a couple scripts.
Which I just finished like
Striking
2
out.
hours ago.
Yeah, I'm very interested to hear what you think about that if you want to just launch from there.
Oh, I loved it. I thought it was great. It's my favorite Peter Weir film I've seen so far.
Yeah, I
Harrison Ford's amazing in it. He's insane.
Yeah, it's really incredible, and I constantly find myself changing my opinion on that movie. It's one of those films where it's like, when I sit, I'm like, no, that was really good, and then I change it, and then I go, no, it wasn't that, and like I am very indecisive on it, and I think it's fun to have a few movies like that where you can't get your thumb on it because there's so much going for it, and I am firmly of the belief that it's one of the most compelling adaptations of any of Schrader's characters because you've never had someone who's truly been that compelling put into that role.
Yeah, Harrison Ford's amazing. It's like it's hard to forget that. Sometimes I forget Harrison Ford's a real actor.
Well,
he's great actor.
Yeah, I definitely want to touch on that subject, but I won't make it into a big tangent. It irritates me when people write off his abilities as an actor. A lot of people love to just think of as one of those actors who's like, yo, you only play one type of character, right?
Which he doesn't.
No, he doesn't at all. And I think had this film been received better when it had come out, like, had he been nominated for an Oscar again, he could have won it. But it was simply because it was received poorly, in part because, Schrader's kind of a hard man to love in the box office.
It's a very interesting movie.
It had the potential to really, I think, change the trajectory of Ford's career. But anyways, back to Schrader. Back to God's Loneliest Man.
Well, that's the thing with Mosquito Coast is it's basically about a guy who thinks he can become a god almost through his manly works.
Yeah. What I really like about that is that when you look at a lot of Schrader's films, he's essentially approached the same character from so many different perspectives.
Yes.
And
sometimes the character he's approaching is still like a real guy, but he's still Schrader's God's only man.
Yeah, and there's something very interesting about an artist that kind of toils and chisels away at the same sort of concept his entire career. And I say that only having the perspective of blue collar, hardcore, and then after that was American Gigolo, right?
Yeah, American Gigolo.
Yeah, but you see, already right there, he's done the same character 3 times.
Don't forget Travis Bickle. I mean, Travis
Yeah.
Bickle is the most defining thing he's ever written because he
Mhm.
he 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 very literally revisits Taxi Driver in First Reformed. Not to spoil anything, I highly recommend you watching First Reformed. I think it's his best movie. It's like a culmination of everything, but I don't want to get that far off the track.
Yeah, that's
But
that's
early
why
in that career, it is like
I felt bad for being understudied coming into this video, but I didn't want to jump into like a late stage film where, particularly with a director where every iteration he's trying is building upon this concept.
yeah,
So it feels strange to tackle him out of order.
right. Uh, I'm sure we'll spend 20 minutes talking about his movies, and then another 40 minutes talking about how fucking insane he is.
Yeah, his escapade. I'm trying to hold off on that right now because I want to
I
try and have
watched
some sort of
Canyons the other night, and this
oof.
that's all the shit that happened behind the scenes for a movie that's just all right. It's funny, but I mean, let's go. His first film, which I guess is kind of relevant to what's happening right now in Hollywood, a bit, is Blue Collar.
Mm-hmm.
Blue Collar is his first film. It's about a union. It's about a bad union. Well, it's about guys who steal from a union, and then they pretty much find out that the union is evil and murderous, pretty much.
And then
Is it?
they kind of get consumed by the beast they were trying to fight against.
Yes.
And I mean, stating it like that in and of itself, you kind of get the whole narrative he was trying to construct in a
Yes.
nutshell.
So
I mean,
it's a
the
very
commentary becomes
bold
obvious.
movie. It's a very political movie.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it is funny when the strikes start happening, and Schrader was criticizing the strike. People were like, "But he made blue collar. Why would he be
Yeah,
be anti
I love when
right
people
field?"
try and argue against like some film artist by like Googling their name and then just picking a movie that has a synopsis they think works and just throwing it at them because no one would argue that if they watched the movie.
Yeah, because like you watch the movie and well, it's a bit gray, some of the morality. Like
Hmm.
the thing with the Richard Pryor's characters, you kind of understand why he sticks with the Union towards the end, uh, especially
Absolutely.
that character.
Oh,
And like
I would not feel confident saying, it's like a damnation of union and a celebration of
no,
the individual because Schrader definitely does not celebrate the individual.
it's a critique of both as like
Hmm.
a concept. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the thing with unions is well, you want to get into political tangent? No, I mean unions are not a bad thing, but the
well,
idea that the union is a perfect uh, system that is incorruptible is something that plagues a lot of uh, our American culture, specifically in Hollywood, because of the communist unions. We could get into that. You want to talk
yeah,
about Ilya Kazan?
yeah, no, but I think what's interesting about that movie in his career is that he had essentially already done a handful of scripts where he had been approaching this lonely man character. I mean, he had
Yeah.
done obviously Taxi Driver, which many will consider his magnum opus of writing.
Yes.
And he had also done things like the Yakuza and
Uh,
I what's the Rolling Thunder was another one. He had a bunch of scripts under his belt by that point. And I think he wanted to take the concept of a character he had been approaching, and then in tackling the idea of a union, acknowledge the fact that it's like this institution is comprised of individuals, so it can only
Right.
be as dependable and as admirable as individuals itself. Because it does end with a very, I think, level-handed level-handed conclusion on unions, because the entire movie is rallying against the union. And then by the end of it, you see just how awful all the individuals involved were. And then it
It just
becomes
breaks
the
down to
of the union.
violence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very, I wouldn't, it's hard to call that film purely nihilistic. Because I would never,
I would not call it purely nihilistic, but I do think that's an aspect. It's nihilistic to the characters almost, because there's the one, I forget the name of the character, but like the
cynical.
one guy, cynical.
Cynical
The
is a
one
much
guy is
better
like
word
kind
for it.
of hopeful, not even hopeful, but he's like more well-rounded than Harvey Keitel. Richard Pryor gets murdered. He gets blued, in a really great scene.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I mean, he came out the gate, I think, very confident and assured in his scripts, and
Yeah, it's
for
also
better
a
or for
funny
worse,
movie
that's his
too.
greatest strength.
Yeah, it's not a completely dark movie. I mean, there's still some lightness in it,
Mm-hmm.
especially early
And
on.
yeah, and I wouldn't say that my computer screen turned off. I wouldn't say that it is a fully fleshed out idea. I do
Hmm.
think it felt underrealized in a lot of aspects, particularly by the time you reach the end. It's like, well, damn, this is, if anything, a really compelling place to, push a narrative and press through and continue.
I kind of would have had it. I kind of think there was a version of the movie where it ends with a riot, and it goes further than just like the the two about to clash. But I do really
Mhm.
like where it ends.
Yeah,
Uh,
it ends on a really indecisive note. The only ultimate impression I finally got from that movie when I finished it, I was like, well, yeah, Schrader definitely has a career ahead of him, because
yeah,
he has a lot he wants to say, but didn't necessarily have everything come together on this first project to say something. But I mean, in the same vein, I mean, I just described hardcore, so I think it's not until American Gigolo that he actually had a fully, from beginning to end, realized script that
American
he
Gigolo
handed
is
himself.
a decade-defining film in many ways. I would be remiss to not point out that William Friedkin has just passed away, uh, and this marks Schrader is one of the last of the great new wave filmmakers that's still alive or still has their brain intact.
Yeah. Well, I, well, yeah. I don't think his brain's gotten worse.
I'm talking about like there's some people like John Milius who are like brain dead now, but I know you don't like Milius.
Is he
But
like actually brain dead or just like an idiot?
he had a he no he had a stroke and he's not like completely there anymore. I mean, he's still like
Uh,
he's a happy guy. He's a happy guy, but we only have like a handful of that era left. Lucas is still alive.
Spielberg.
Spielberg, Scorsese, Allen. I feel like there's one
Oh,
more big
yeah.
one I'm
We
missing.
didn't need to keep Alan, to be perfectly honest.
There's like one more big one that's still alive.
Well, De Palma's still here, isn't he?
De Palma, yeah, De Palma. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, but Coppola's still here.
Yeah, Coppola. He's got one more movie coming out.
Yep.
Some would put Abel Ferrara in the list. I wouldn't,
He's
as much as I like his
technically
movies.
starts there, but he really realizes himself in the '80s, I think.
Yes,
So he's kind of a different paradigm.
and
Same with
there's
like Gilliam.
yes, Gilliam.
Um,
Uh, but most
Technically,
of them are,
Polanski's still here.
yeah, technically Polanski. Technically Polanski. But the whole era has pretty much died out. And even most of those filmmakers we listed, De Palma and Lucas, don't make movies anymore. Friedkin has a movie premiering in Venice soon.
Well, Freakin's just as goofy
That'd be
as
cool.
Schrader, if not more off the
True.
chain.
He's insane. I was working on a video and I watched the interview between him and Nicholas Winding Refn called Sorcerers. It is I recommend you at least like listen to it because it's insane.
Yeah,
I mean,
I do want it. I do
it's
want to
interesting
hear it.
because I think he's a great artist, but he detests the idea of being an artist.
Yeah,
He's like very, which is like
uh,
interesting.
I think
Yeah.
to bring it back to Schrader, what makes him so interesting is that he really embodied a cynicism that was incredibly prevalent at the beginning of New Wave, at the peak
Hmm.
of the disenchantment with perceived American stagnation and
Right.
loss, and Vietnam generation and a whole bunch of crises that the not only just America but the Western world was going through, though
Yes.
particularly America. But he came to the forefront at a point when American New Wave, I think, had moved more prominently back into the studio's hands,
Uh-huh.
and so there.
I mean, he was part of one of the big movies that is considered to kill the new wave. I mean, he wrote Raging Bull.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
I actually don't know the narrative around Raging Bull. Is that considered to have killed New Wave?
that's one of the three big ones that considered to kill the new wave. That's that and Heaven's Gate, and then there's one other big one.
Well, did Raging Bull fail? I thought Raging Bull
Yes,
did
if
well.
it did well critically, but financially it did really poorly, and it wasn't till like after a bit of a reappraisal that it started gaining traction again. And Raging Bull's a masterpiece,
I
too.
understand the big films people list that derailed New Wave would be Heaven's Gate, Sorcerer, New York, New York
Sorcerers.
by Scorsese.
Yes.
There's another one I'm missing. Oh yeah, From the Heart, Coppola. And
Big
then
Wednesday too. That was another one.
and
Big
then
Wednesday was like a movie a lot of studios were like, okay, we can't do independent movies anymore. We can't
I mean,
do this type of bullshit.
I would say that's because Millis just sucks. I can't defend
Yeah.
Big Wednesday. I would look at that final product and also say, yeah, this is kind of over, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but what makes that so interesting is that Schrader, right when he was coming into his own, kind of had missed the bus.
Right.
Which really interesting seeing his career, because he's definitely one of those holdovers and remnants that I think has stayed fairly consistent to his roots.
Yeah.
He's kind of
As
always, even when,
inconsistent as his movies are, he still is.
yeah,
He's a rebel. I'd say that,
yeah, I don't,
for better or worse.
yeah, a director like Scorsese or Spielberg or Lucas or any of them, right? I feel like has a level of pacification and adaptation
Yeah.
to the changing cinematic landscape. And I would not say that about Schrader. That's not the impression I get from him at
Nope.
all. Yeah. But that's important, particularly since I think that not only does he hearken back to an analysis of individualism
Mm-hmm.
that I think could be fairly level-handed and salient in modernity.
Yeah.
But he also, I think, harkens back to a level of maturity and honesty that you don't get anymore in film. I
Right.
mean, I can't think of a lot of modern films that would be willing to do something like Blue Collar, right? Where it's both an
Mm-hmm.
attack on individuals and the society that they create.
Yes.
You can find a lot of movies right now that are trying to celebrate the idea of individual and are trying to celebrate the idea of a society.
Mhm.
I mean, to think of popular examples, I could rattle off the top of my head, Everything Everywhere, All at Once.
Yes.
Certainly, I mean, it feels downright fucking kumbaya when you compare it to like a lot of the media that was coming out in the 70s, and
It
it's
you
sometimes it,
compare it to Mishima, and it's like it's
yeah. And I
yeah,
understand that it's a bizarre comparison to make, but it just kind of shows where the current zeitgeist is at.
yeah. I
Um,
don't want to jump directly into Mishima, but that's a movie I see a lot of influence in the current more the artsy film landscape currently. I think mostly because of its reappraisal through the Criterion Collection.
mhm.
Uh, you can see a lot of I can see bits of it and everything all at once. I see a lot of it in Blonde, uh, and many similar films that have come out recently.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
very ethereal film. Why does my
yeah,
computer keep turning off? It's
shit.
very frustrating.
And you want to talk about want to get into hardcore and American Gigolo?
I would love to get hardcore into American Gigolo purely because it's absolutely difficult for me to get invested in Mishima in the same way because I don't know enough about Mishima the person, and I do think that the film very passionately explores only a few aspects of him as a person.
Yeah,
So it's kind of a hard thing to talk about. But hardcore and American Gigolo, I could definitely go off about.
because I don't have that much to say about uh, hardcore. I like hardcore. I think it's a really well made film. I think George C. Scott is great. I mean, he's a fantastic actor, even though most people just think of him as well George C. Scott. You know,
That infuriates me to no end because George C. Scott is an incredible actor, and people, I don't know. There's a lot of people that have no appreciation for confident character actors.
yes,
It's it's baffling to me that there's so many people that just be like, oh, this is a one note actor. They can only do one type of thing, and it's like the nuance that George C. Scott is able to create within this very stoic and assured character because he can play it noble and he can play it absolutely brutal and he can lampoon himself. There's so many things that,
he can go insane with it, like in
yeah,
Exorcist 3.
mm-hmm. No,
Uh,
but he can accomplish so much, and um, I love that Schrader picked him for the role because you could not have picked a better actor for that specific role.
yeah, I think I think he makes the movie personally.
Yeah, because
Uh,
he really understands the character, and all of the best moments in the film happened because that Scott has the maturity in order to not treat this character like a caricature.
mhm.
Um, but the issue is that while hardcore is just a fantastic like bisection of Schrader's mind at that exact point, it again perfectly embodies the fact that he had missed the bus. Because
Yeah,
I mean, you can't make a movie like that at post Star Wars. You can't.
right.
It doesn't work. Um, you
I
have to
think the
change up the
movie
formula.
doesn't completely land on its feet by the end.
No, not at all. It completely fumbles and doesn't ultimately prove most of, if any, of the points it set out to communicate. But
Right.
that's what I think matters. Uh, it's just one of those things where Schrader is the sort of artist where he's not going to conceal himself when he's making a film.
Right.
And that movie is undeniably Schrader, and I think I can't think of the damn word I'm trying to say, but it's like invaluable as an ability to like get a read on him at that point in his life.
Yeah.
The sort of cynicism and frustration he was having with the direction of Hollywood, how he was reflecting on his own personal life,
Hmm.
how he was trying to reconcile his childhood with where he was presently at in his life. There's so much going on there. Um, and then the film has a lot of strengths. The performances, a lot of the actors, I think, do a good job, even though the script's very muddled.
Hmm.
He's a confident director. The movie has a fantastic soundtrack by, I think, one of America's great composers of the 70s and of any period. Same composer who did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and
Hmm.
did I had to cover my mouth. I just burped. Who did one of my favorite compositions? Which One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, one of my favorite compositions. But he also did one of my favorite compositions in Cutter's Way. That took my brain a second. Which I think if
Oh,
no
Jack
one's
Nietzsche.
seen
Yeah.
that movie, but I'm not going to go off on a tangent there. Uh, and it's interesting how it seems Schrader is cursed by the fact that he can surround himself with artists that understand exactly what he's trying to go for, but he
Hmm.
himself is not necessarily always able to understand what he's trying to communicate.
Also, Milius produced this. I didn't realize, so I went to look at the crew.
I
It's
don't.
interesting.
I'm not. I'm not just going to bash on the man, especially after you told me that he suffered from a debilitating stroke. But I have nothing nice to say about him if you keep bringing him up. I'm gonna
I hope hopefully this will be the last time we bring him up.
I'm gonna have to get a lot meaner, and I've already been very mean.
Yeah, and then it's strange that he followed Hardcore right up with American Gigolo.
No, I don't think that's strange at all. I mean, it's the exact response I'd expect someone like Schrader to make when he's trying to assess the film landscape, and he's like, "Well, where's my compromise, right? Like, what
Make
what do
a
I do next?
very
What's the next
poppy
move?"
film that's still
Yeah, and it's
very
got Richard
dark.
Gere. It's
It's got
all
Richard
the sort
Gere,
of concessions he'd have to make in order to pitch this sort of movie in the '80s, right? They'd go like, "Okay, who's
right?
the actor? What's the style? What's the spin?" He's like, "Yeah, it's like saucy. It's got like that risque, scandalous edge. It's sexy. You can see him
It's
trying to
got
pitch
cool
it in the studio.
dudes.
Not that I'd ever want Schrader to say the word sexy while looking at me, but you know what I mean."
Sure.
Yeah, but the jump from hardcore to American Gigolo, um, tonally, I think it can be jarring, but as an artist working in the Hollywood system, it makes absolute sense to me.
Yeah,
Um,
I think Gigolo's great.
oh,
Uh,
I think it's a fantastic movie.
Kicked it
Actually, I
off the
think,
'80s,
well,
pretty much.
the only terrible thing about that movie is the clothes Richard Gere wears in it. I mean, not to talk about something petty too much, but I swear to God, every single time he was putting on that suit in a movie, it felt like like a crime against humanity. It felt like an affront to God. It was remarkable.
Yeah.
I watched that
It-
movie with my mother, and I'm like, "Is that just like the worst of the '80s?" And she's like, "Yeah."
yep.
She's like, "That only could have happened then."
Yeah.
But yeah, I think American Gigolo is the first time he was able to actually handle a script of his where he had a point and proved it
Yes.
without
It's
any sort of like caveats or lost tangents or unrealized components.
no, it's a pretty straightforward movie.
Hmm.
Uh, Definitely a
Very sick.
vibe.
Yeah,
Uh,
and again, I love the fact that Schrader kept working with actors that I don't think were getting properly appreciated.
yeah.
Um,
Light
I
gear.
Yeah, because even at his peak, I think
Bill
people were
Duke.
kind of seeing Gear as a
Go
pretty
on.
boy.
Yeah.
Um,
He was able
and
to do a
I
lot
mean,
in this one.
yeah, because literally, you can look at the lineup. Uh, he worked with Pryor in his first film. Not that George C. Scott was underappreciated in his time, but certainly now, I think a lot of those fine actors of the '70s don't get the same sort of appreciation that they should. And then you have Gear in this one, who's kind of, again, another one of those actors that get written off as a pretty boy lead. Um, but any director, I think, that can understand the strengths and weaknesses of an actor can achieve nuance really well.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at a bunch of great actors who directors don't know how to approach, and they completely
Hence
fuck them up.
the
Like De Niro,
100 terrible films Nick Cage is in.
exactly. Or someone like De Niro or Pacino or any of those great '70s actors who like start just getting a bunch of movies where the director goes, I want you to channel your artistry. And it's like, fuck. You're enabling these coked up bastards to just say stupid shit in front of the camera.
Yeah, I think Cage, who has worked with Schrader a couple times,
Mm-hmm.
he's one where it's like there's so many movies where he's just bland and sucks, but if you give him to a proper director and give him a proper script, he can be incredible.
Yeah.
He can
Yeah.
change the movie.
And Schrader definitely, I think it helps a lot of actors when there's like a persona that they can identify, like an eccentric artist. Because
Right.
that, even though it's kind of a cliche, it could be very invigorating, right?
Yes.
And I can't imagine that working with Schrader doesn't give you a million ideas.
Yes. The fucking Travis Bickle. I mean,
Yeah.
Travis Bickle is one of the most three-dimensional characters ever put to film. Mostly because of De Niro, but also the writing of Schrader. I mean, the stories of just a lot of the scenes in Taxi Driver are just based on shit that happened to Schrader while he was just night drinking, walking
Yeah.
around New York homeless.
I mean, well, God, I don't know what we could even say about Taxi Driver. It has been said a million times.
It's one of the
But
best movies ever made, but there's still the fact that there's still so much that can be said about the movie after 50 years. It can tell us that it's one of those pieces of art that will stick around. But at the same
going
time,
away.
there's not that much we can keep saying about it. Uh, I mean, I remember when I watched it, I didn't get it pretty much.
It's
And then when I rewatched it, I was just like, oh, okay, I get what this is going. With. This is just like analysis of what happens to an individual when they become completely isolated from everyone.
I think it's a perfect example of one of those films where, even though I would never accuse the people who made it of not having a firm idea of what they were trying to do, they realized something so much bigger than themselves.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things in Schroeder's script, the whole shootout at the end it was going to be black people. Uh,
Yeah, again,
Scorsese,
that's one of the many changes that goes a long way.
yeah, because Scorsese's like, well, if he kills a bunch of black people, even if it's subtext, it gives an implication that he's doing this for any sort of real reason.
Yeah,
Uh,
it distracts from the point.
yes,
Again, that's what I
and
mean. Collaboration, I think, has helped Schrader realize a lot of his points a lot more than necessarily Schrader working by himself. But again, I haven't seen enough of Schrader. I know people say First Reform is a remarkable film, and I should have seen that before coming into this conversation.
I recommend just watching it just because it's just a movie. I remember watching the first one, I was like, wow, that was a great movie, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it for
Mm-hmm.
months, and I still think about it regularly. I think it's the best movie of the past decade. Uh, and it was like Schrader can be very hit or miss, but when he hits, it's amazing. It's weird because you can tell it's the same guy who directed American Gigolo and Mishima
Mm-hmm.
and First Reformed That's the same guy, but you can't tell it's the same guy who also directed The Canyons, Autofocus, Cat People. They're very different
Oh, you
stylistically.
why you
I
gotta
like
oh,
Cat People. I like Cat
you
People.
gotta
I
be
think these
careful
movies are
there.
fine. They're different though. There's much more control in those movies compared to the other ones. Uh, let's just talk about Cat People. I like Cat People.
I
I
love
don't like
cat
it as
people.
much as you, but I like that
I
movie quite a bit.
adore people. I think Schrader took a classic script from Hollywood that was really fucking overrated. It was just trash. And was like, no, there's something good here. I'm gonna remake it. Because when you watch have you seen the original Cat People?
I've seen like 10 minutes and shut it off.
Yeah, because it sucks. It's really boring. And nothing happens in it. But there's an interesting character study right under the surface that can really cut into sexuality in an interesting way.
Yes.
But because it's the 40s, they don't have, I think, either the desire or necessarily the nuance in order to actually pick that apart.
Right.
And Schrader's just a little pervert, so he's like, I gotta chew on this.
A
And
very religious pervert.
yeah,
It's
and
fascinating.
it makes perfect sense. Isn't that the movie though where that actress like didn't isn't that the movie where like that notorious incident where like he dumped his like significant other and like bought like a wedding ring and everything?
I don't. It might be for Natasha Kinski.
I
It's it's
I
funny.
you know that story, right?
Yeah, I know the story. You told it to me.
Yeah.
Uh,
That I forget what movie, but that sounds like the movie would have happened on.
I'm trying to remember. Didn't wasn't he like stalking Lindsay Lohan on the side of the canyons?
Would you I don't even know, but like rule of thumb, yeah, probably.
Yeah. I mean,
He's
I said, you can't. All the great artists are a little bit fucking insane, or either no, or fully fucking insane. Uh,
yeah, he's fucking weird. Like I wouldn't even like I if he was stalking, can you hear someone talking in the background? Just making sure.
no, I can't hear shit.
Okay, that's good. If he was like stalking me, I wouldn't be afraid for my safety. I'd be afraid for my ease of mind. Okay, 1 second.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm with my parents right now, obviously, because I'm a college student. It's the summer,
Mhm.
and they are very. Uh, it's not worth talking about. Anyway, uh, yeah, he identified something in that script that really needed to be fleshed out, and I think
Yeah.
he was able to find the line between like the sexy and erotic and like the creepy and uncomfortable, and
Right.
it really just works for me.
It's also a very New Orleans film, which is now where he currently resides. I think he
Okay.
like fell in love with the city because of the movie, and you can feel it throughout. And also the incredible song David Bowie made for it.
Oh, one of the best songs commissioned for a movie. Period.
Yeah.
I fucking
Which,
hated seeing it in how Tarantino used it in the Glorious Bastards.
oh yeah, he does. I haven't seen Glorious Bastards in a long time, and I still
I
consider it
I know
my
I
least favorite Tarantino.
I know I am very unpopular in my not like literally, but I hold unpopular opinions about
You're a
Tarantino.
controversial dude.
I'm so controversial. No,
You didn't like the Mario movie.
but I just can't. I couldn't fucking stand. I could not stand to see that song just completely stripped of like the the whole movie that fed into it. because like
Yeah.
the movie doesn't open on this song; it opens on like the prelude for it, and so after the whole
Right.
movie, it hits that song, and you're like, "Holy fuck, that's so good! It's such a good song."
Rocks. I think that's why David Bowie was in Last Temptation of Christ. Though I know Last Temptation of Christ was like a nightmare shoot. Uh, I think every movie about Jesus ends up being a nightmare shoot because Passion of the Christ was also just like insane shit was happening the entire time. Uh, yeah, and Last Temptation is I want you haven't seen it, right?
No, I own it too, and I haven't seen it, and I feel bad because I could have
It took
easily watched it before going into this.
It's not a movie you can easily sit down and watch. It took me a while to decide whether I liked it or not. It took me 2 years to decide whether I liked it or not. Uh, I like it now, uh, but that's an interesting one because it goes from God's lonely man to man's lonely God,
Well, that's why I
basically.
felt so bad not watching it before coming into this conversation because it seems like one of the most obvious characters to analyze in order to figure out like Schrader's MO.
Jesus.
Yeah, like how did he handle Christ?
Yes. I know he doesn't like the movie anymore. Same thing with Scorsese. Scorsese doesn't like the movie either. That's why he's making another Jesus movie. Uh, but I mean, it's
Man,
interesting.
they're
I
really
mean,
doing
religion.
him dirty on that one.
Yeah, religion is. I mean, his uh, Schrader's Christianity is a big part of his films, all the way back in hardcore. And I mean, it really comes to fruition in First Reformed. Right, that's what the movie's entirely about. Uh, it's all, which is weird because all his movies are incredibly violent and sexual, and about the struggles of violence and sexuality.
Well, I mean, I feel like in that sense he's like a very perfect Protestant.
Yeah, well, I know he was a Calvinist, and then he turned into I think it's a Episcopalian, which that's kind of part of First Reformed, this the changing of the church. That one's very much has like this backdrop of like commercialization of Christianity. As just a guy's just freaking out over the fact it's like, man, the world's gonna end and we're not doing anything.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm gonna ask you to not
I ain't
define.
spoiling shit. I ain't spoiling shit. I'm not gonna say that much. I'm just gonna say it's a there's crucial aspects on it. So yeah, I think it's his best film. I think his second best film is Mishima, which I rewatched last night.
Of the movies I've seen by him, and I've only seen his first 5 films, I would probably either favor American Gigolo or Cat People. I just personally like Cat People, and I think American
Yeah,
Gigolo is the best character I've seen him do. Again, I think the issue of Mishima is not that it isn't inspired and passionate, but
it's
that
dealing with Yukio Mishima, one of the most like there's so much to go in depth
yeah,
with Yukio
one of
Mishima.
the most complicated figures in modern literature who encapsulates so much about so many different things. I mean, you can't talk about Mishima without talking about like the history of Japan. You can't talk about
Yes.
Mishima without talking about like political history. You can't talk about Mishima without like talking about like how masculinity is perceived across all sorts of different cultures. Because the man was like, oh, he wasn't just like a Japanese writer. He was like a complete Western soup as well. He had a lot of European influences that he worked and chewed on.
Hmm.
So it's just a mess. And I think crucially in the movie Mishima, he does miss the masculine aesthetic. And
I don't
part
think
of
he does it all. I think
no,
that's what the film's
crucial.
about.
No, not it's what not in the sequences, but crucially in the casting of the actor Mishima, too old. Nothing against that actor. Fantastic actor. Has done a bunch of great movies, but he was too old for the part.
If I well, I was gonna say if I have one problem would be the film, it is that he looks absolutely nothing like Mishima.
Yeah, not
Both in
only
his age and uh,
his
his character.
age, his physicality, and I mean, what's crucial to Mishima, and even though I think Mishima never would have brought it up because it's an obvious elephant in the room, the dude
He's
was
a
like this.
homo.
No, not that. He was short. He was really short. Mishima was like, I think 5'1".
Oh, shit.
He was really short. And so there's a whole addition. I mean, and it puts so much of his other struggles in perspective, right? Like trying to prove how he's masculine, how he was infantilized when he was younger, right? He was
Yeah.
legitimately a smaller person.
Mm-hmm.
And not to be like the whole Napoleon Man syndrome, but that's definitely a sort of person where like every aspect of his,
Being
being
is just
is
uh,
crucial. And so
yes.
it's like it's the same reason like that's the same sort of critique I have against like Lawrence of Arabia, where it's like we're talking about someone who's like 5'4" and you cast someone who's like 6'1", and it's like that's a completely different ethos entirely. Not the point.
Yeah.
But with Mishima, to having an older, taller actor who's not as physically fit misses so much about Mishima. Because I mean, like, I think one of the whole reasons he ended up doing what he did was because he wanted to die sort of like that young, ideal male. He didn't want to see himself get old.
Yeah, and that's part of the movie is his like the encroachingness of his stress of aging.
Mm-hmm.
There's an entire monologue about I think it's taken from Sons of the Steel. Like a lot of it's taken from his actual like philosophy books.
Yep.
The where it's romantic and that stuff's amazing. Like all like he's an incredible writer. Just like sitting back and just letting the actor read out the lines. Like the my favorite one is the whole thing about women, the masks people wear, and to become beautiful, and men don't talk about, but the desire of every man to become beautiful is within death. And I think that hits a lot about what Mishima wanted, and a lot about what men in general.
Well,
Uh,
you can certainly see
you can see
where
that in
Schrader,
Schrader's films.
yeah, where Schrader latched onto that idea. Because that's why it's such a fast. Like I won't write off the film. I'll just say that I think because of how complicated Mishima is it's almost a thankless task.
Right.
Though I think he will undoubtedly, I think, make the most significant film about Mishima I think that will ever be made. I don't know how you could make a film that captures Mishima better unless it was like a fucking TV series, right? Where you have like
Yeah.
12 hours to chew on this man. But I mean, even then, the
Yeah.
imagery
It is
realizes so much about Mishima.
a beautiful film. It
Mhm.
looks amazing. The entire well, I mean it's clear like the parts that take place in present, like they're very much stripped. Though there's still some really good shots. But like when they do the stories or the flashbacks, everything just looks amazing. And taps into the whole ideal of beauty really well. And
Every
the score.
yeah,
I remember
oh
that's the
oh
scene where they
oh
start the Golden Pavilion, and the score is just like you see the two characters talking, and then you just see them like walking towards the Golden Pavilion, and then the score starts rising up. It's this very
that's
like overwhelming scene.
that's a
Uh,
that's a Philip Glass movie, isn't it?
yeah, Philip Glass did the score. I think well he wrote the score, and it was conducted by uh, some other musician. But it's one could call the score repetitive because it's using the same theme as the basis for all the music.
I
Uh,
would be one.
but the way it's taken in different ways, like the second sequence, the way it's used is it becomes this more jazzy version of itself, and then like the first time it's this very whimsical, uh, like beautiful thing to tapping in what the Golden Pavilion is. Second one, more jazzy, more down to earth, less orchestra to it. And then once you get to Runaway Horses, it is very grounded, straight up, just regular violins, regular instrumentation, stripped down to its bare parts and used pretty conservatively compared to how it was used earlier in the film. And the music, the cinematography, the acting,
How do
everything is great.
I say this in the nicest way possible? It's again a completely
It
selfish
annoys
tangent.
you.
No, as a composer in the broader sense, because I know he's a complicated figure in how he's received in music canon. I don't hate Philip Glass, but as a film composer, he fucking annoys me. Oh my god. Oh, because Philip Glass will do like a tenth of the amount of compositions he ought to make for a fucking movie, and then he just goes like, and we'll just redo it the whole fucking time.
Isn't one of your favorite movies The Truman Show?
Yeah, and one of the only, I think Peter Weir was like, hey,
Well,
don't
a
fuck
lot
me.
of the music in it is not written for The Truman Show. It uses
Yeah.
the Golden Pavilion
Mhm.
track in it.
Yeah, and Peter Weir has the fucking intelligence to realize that, you need variation to the soundtrack. Hit your head against the floor until you die.
For 20 minutes.
Yeah, I fucking hate that movie so much. I can't describe how much I hate that movie. And again, like Philip Glass, like not a terrible composer. I like Candyman, but like the point is just like a lot.
I should have did Candyman.
He's a lot of times he's enabled to like realize the worst aspects of himself as a composer. Anyways, but Mishima, importantly, I think I wouldn't agree with you. I think that it's a masterpiece, but it certainly is incredibly compelling. And again, it's another one of those films I think that bisects Schrader's brain perfectly.
Right. I think it's probably one of the most important out of his entire filmography. Also, he cared about it more. I mean, like he says there's only been 4 great films he's ever been a part of: Affliction, Taxi Driver, Mishima, and First Reformed. I haven't seen Affliction, but that's what he says. Those are the only 4 great films. Yeah, Affliction.
That's interesting because that's the one that stands out.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I would, looking at his own. That's a problem with him. Looking at his own personal films, he starts to get a lot of that sort of samey midlife crisis feelings that you feel like directors go for in their careers. Like Freakin' did that, where you watch his movies and you reach a point where you're like, what are you doing here? What are you doing? Come on, okay. What's going on? Happens to the best of them. But
yeah, you can kind of see that, I'm sure. To go through the movies you haven't seen, let's see, Patty Hearst is a really great movie. It's probably his funniest movie.
I want to see Patty Hearst. I want to see The Comfort of Strangers. So
that one's really good. I watched it in a pretty bad mood, so maybe I didn't get the full experience. I was just really pissed off that day. I don't remember why.
Not gonna lie, I'm probably gonna skip Light of Day. I'm just not feeling it.
I haven't seen Light of Day. Light Sleeper is great. I watched that like at barely awake, so it was a very visceral experience. Like forcing myself awake, it's just like this movie is insane to me. Autofocus, I think, was the first solo directed movie I'd seen from him. Because they talked about it on Come Town.
Yeah, the movies I wanted to watch by him are Patty Hearst, Comfort of Strangers, Light Sleepers, Affliction, and then honestly, I was probably going to jump straight to First Reformed and then try and fill in after that. But it's those 5 films. Patty Hearst, Comfort of Strangers, Light Sweeper, Affliction, First Reformed.
Yeah, I recommend First Reformed to pretty much anybody because I think it's an important movie to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I recommend it to a lot of Christians because it is very much about the faith and Schrader's faith. The ending, in particular, varies depending on someone's spirituality, and that was the way Schrader designed it. It is because it's I'm not going to go
Yeah,
in depth.
I
And then
think
card counters like First Reformed again, but with cards.
okay, that's kind of random. What enamors me about the idea of First Reformed, I don't know why I haven't seen it. I'm so lazy with modern releases. Is that I think religious films are one of the most thankless genres
Yes.
because it's so rare that anyone actually approaches it with any level of nuance or maturity.
Right.
I can
That's
think of when, like, if you ask me right now, like, what are religious films that I think are good,
hmm
all I could name to you is like The Believer with Ryan Gosling.
Oh
So
yeah.
I think it's generally a fantastic religious film, and
Yeah, I
I
like
don't.
that one.
Yeah,
Does
and
Exorcist 3 count?
no,
I think, but what's his face? He's super Catholic.
it's not.
I
I don't know. I don't know if
not
that's the same
intended
thing.
to be about. Well, I mean, it is about religion. Uh, that one's hard to quantify. There are other films I think the director's religion or religious imagery is very present in. I think Wolf of Wall Street is it's filled with a lot of religious imagery and is very religious in its core,
Cool Hand.
but that's not cool and
I like that. I like the Christ symbolism in that one. I hate Wolf of Wall Street. It
yeah.
annoys me. I don't get it. I don't get the hype.
Uh,
Again,
that one's that's not that's all subtextual though. As terms of stuff like First Reformed.
subtext is just code for I expect the viewer to think about this, and I'm not going to do it myself. They can suck my dick.
Okay.
I can't. No, actually, that's something I want to talk about Schrader. I don't think, like, just from talking to you, I don't get the impression that he's cheapened in a lot of other ways directors cheapen. Because I do think a lot of directors just kind of lose sight of why they started directing in the first place, you know?
Yeah. Well,
Like,
what I believe to my core is that uh, there's no reason to tell a story unless you have a point or a reason to tell it. To make a film, like there's no real point to me of making a film unless you do have a point to illustrate in it.
in my mind, there's no point to making a film unless you feel like you have to prove something, like you're at war with the world and they don't
Yeah,
understand you. And that's why I think success
that's
can kill.
Schrader.
Well, yeah,
That's Schrader in a nutshell. He hates
yeah,
the world. The world
yeah.
hates him.
You have to be against the world. You have to be sitting there going like, no one gets me, and they're not giving me credit. I genuinely think that perhaps that's because I'm at a point right now where I'm trying to prove myself. So I empathize a lot more with the earlier stages of directors where you can feel in the projects, they're trying to prove themselves, right?
Yeah.
I mean, something like Mean Streets or Reservoir Dogs or Sugarland Express, all of these
hmm
earlier works in directors' careers where they have to prove themselves, I think pushes the best in an artist. It pushes collaboration. It pushes focus. It just hones someone in. And I think while Schrader definitely has always been a lot more excessive and self-indulgent, he still has always had that push. He's always
Yeah.
had that fire under his butt where he's like, I've got something to say.
I gotta say something, and I gotta say it somehow. Uh, and I gotta say, like, make a point, have a reason to say something in a sincere way, not in the very fake, phony way. I think a lot of big movies
Exactly.
they're coming out to.
And I know, again, this is where I start saying popular opinions. I don't expect you to agree with me at all. But, like, when it's like I need something genuine and sincere to say, and I don't want to say it like in a fake, phony way. I think a lot of directors, they attach themselves to this like love of theatrics and this love of like the the idealized form of cinema.
They love
That's
cinema.
it's just dishonest though.
Babylon. Babylon. Fucking
Yeah, but
Babylon.
yeah, I mean that's a great example. But I mean even something like I know I a lot of people kind of give me the side eye when I say a movie like Goodfellas does nothing for me, right? Like completely alienates me. But I really feel like there's just sort of a cheap infatuation with film as a medium that completely distracts from anything real about the characters.
Yeah, that's something I've kind of sort of fallen out of love of film. There was a good period in my life where I was like, film is the greatest thing man has ever created. It's an art form, and then now I'm just like, it's whatever. And then getting away from film, like focusing more on like reading literature, reading comic books. Saying I'm talking about like artful comic books, not fucking Black Spider Man. Uh, okay, that's not racist. Uh,
It is
no, but
racist,
like
just
going to like other mediums,
no, it's
saying
not
other
racist.
art
It's like you're
forms.
Schrader. It's a Schraderism.
It's a Schraderism. I don't like Miles Morales, but no, like this other mediums because I think film is a very incestuous medium. I've just really thought about that a lot, especially after watching Babylon and Ant-Man Quantumania. Those are two movies that just like kind of
All mediums are incestuous. I
no,
mean,
but I think the way filmmaking, because I mean, I paint. I mean, I come from a family of sculptors, but the other art forms they do take a lot from. All art forms are incestuous to a degree. I think filmmakers are way too obsessed with taking from other films that they're locked. Their minds are locked into this one medium, and then you get people like Edgar Wright or late stage Damien Chazelle, which can which become too
Tarantino.
infatuated with these like Tarantino. You could say it's, I think there's a certain area. Fucking Django Unchained is on this. Like you get too obsessed with this, paying homage to cinema instead of just making a film.
I
I've been thinking a lot about this since I watched Asteroid City, because when I watched Asteroid City, a bell rung in my head. It's like, oh, this is not a filmmaker's film. This is Wes Anderson had wanted to say something, and he told it pretty much against regular filmmaking rules. He was somehow able to scam all these people into being in it. I was like, oh, this is. It struck me as something that felt very different to everything else coming out, and just like maybe as artists, not to say that artist is a bullshit term, but I mean as someone who wants to create something, you
what
shouldn't just be focused on the one thing and taking from the one medium when there's so much else out there. Uh,
yeah,
that's me.
I would say that when I use the word artist, I guess I would never want to imply the idea that I think like people are in control of art, right?
Yes.
I very much I resonate with like Hayao Miyazaki said. He's like, I'm a slave to art. I don't get to make what I want.
Right.
I do think that's probably one of
Um,
the more honest relationships with art, because that's how I feel about it a lot of time when I'm just doing my editing, right?
yeah.
It's like I'm not making this because I want to make it. I'm making this because that's how it was going to end up being made. Like that's
Yeah.
I trying to tap into something that's larger than myself, and it's sort of the language of possession, I guess. I don't know how to describe it. That doesn't sound like
No,
those
I've been feeling it recently, where
I don't
returning
want
to stuff I've made, I realize it's completely different. Like when I visit it now that I've separated myself from it, than my mindset when I was making it. And it's its own thing. It's not
yeah,
mine.
yeah, I wouldn't want I don't want to try and sound pretentious about it, because that it does sound like a very pretentious thing to say, to be like,
It's
oh, it's bigger than myself, it possesses me. But it's like, no, it's not. I don't think
like a
an artist
car.
is being honest necessarily when they're
You can
making
make a
something
car,
they
but at the end of the day, it's a
but
car, and it's going to do its own thing and be a vehicle on the road. You can make it look as
well,
pretty as you want, but it serves that purpose, and it will serve that purpose.
it's a form of communication, right? And so
Hmm.
I think the only way to be honest is to try and just not be as deliberate about it, not be as controlled about it. And obviously
Yeah.
that's just one that's because of my sensibilities. Obviously, there'll be many people that would associate, like, no, you can't make art unless every aspect of it's defined, right?
Okay.
But
People always bring up Stanley Kubrick. Stanley
Mhm.
Kubrick was not as controlling as people imply.
No.
He was way more I mean, he wanted what he wanted, but he was way more loose about the
Mhm.
film or the filmmaking process. I mean, A Clockwork Orange is a big example. Eyes Wide Shut's another big example.
I
He
I I
he
just love
wasn't doing it a million takes because he wanted to get the specific one that was in his head. He was doing a million takes because he wanted to see what he could get
Mhm.
out of it.
Yeah, my favorite thing that kind of disproves the whole Kubrick thing. We have to get back to Schrader at some point.
Just
The
mention it. We'll get back to Schrader.
Yeah, that disproves the whole Kubrick thing is when, like, while filming Full Metal Jacket, they were trying to do a scene where he goes over you know, the obstacle course. But after like 2 takes, he fell and like pulled a muscle in his chest and hurt himself. And so in the movie, you just see that hard cut between the 2 takes, and like Kubrick was just like, "Well, those are the 2 good takes we had."
That's what we got, and it informs the what happens in the film with
Hmm.
Gomer's character.
Yeah, and he's like,
Uh,
"Okay, it's good enough. I'm not going to push it." Right?
in the Criterion Channel had a documentary about Schrader while he was making First Reformed,
Hmm.
and he was talking about how when he was finishing up, he realized there's a specific shot that is a straight up that is a recreation of a shot from Taxi Driver. It's when the character is standing in front of the mirror, setting himself up. And Schrader didn't realize until editing that it was a recreation. That he unintendedly made this recreation of Taxi Driver and realized, oh, this is what I'm doing. This is what this film is doing. Uh, because I think directors get into this mindset of, yeah, everything has to be controlled, and we're going in circles now. But I
Yeah,
do think
it's
Schrader, he he lets the film go on its own. And he does have a lot of collaborators. Coppola and Lucas were very influential on the making of Mishima.
hmm
Specifically, the story scenes. They're all in the American Zoetrope factory. Uh, that he wasn't like completely on his own. And of course, his brother was very instrumental in the Mishima. Or, yeah,
yeah.
his
I'm
wee
glad
brother.
you mentioned his brother, because his brother is so engrossed in Japan. It's fascinating,
Yeah, I think
and
that's what ended up
you
getting
hear about him enough.
uh, Schrader into Mishima.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, because I mean, the between his brother is Leonard, right? That's his name,
yeah, Leonard Schrader.
Leonard Schrader. I mean, he did. The Man Who Stole the Sun, which is a very fascinating movie that tapped into a lot of existentialism that was happening in Japanese society. And then he also did one of the Toro-san movies, which is very interesting because that's one of the most quintessential Japanese film series I can think of. And so an American writer working on that, it's like if a Chinese guy wrote a Bond film, right? It's kind of like, oh, whoa. It's like that you have to really be tuned into what you're doing in order to pull that off. No, not even like a Bond film. It's like if I can't think of an equivalent because Toro-san's is like a very like wholesome character in a film series. And I don't know if America necessarily has the same thing. But anyways, and he did a couple Japanese works where it's like, wow, you are really invested in this. And he also was one of the writers on the Yakuza, which I think is one of the most interesting handlings of Schrader's character by another director. They're all interesting, but I think...
Yeah, Sidney Pollack, right?
Yeah, Sidney Pollack saw a lot of nobility in Schrader's character. And you hear Schrader talking about it, it's like it feels like a misfire, right? Because I think Schrader likes to attach himself to the cynicism of his characters.
Yeah.
But I think Sidney Pollack grabbing his character and finding something noble about it, where it's still God's loneliest man. It's a damaged man. It's a fundamentally lonely person, right?
Right.
But he sort of sees like the lost soul trying to reach out to someone. That's undoubtedly there in all of Schrader's characters, but Schrader sort of sees the worst in it, I think, a lot of the time. He sees how that desperation and loneliness drives you to dark places. Whereas I think
Gigolo, out of the films we've talked about, is one of the exceptions to this.
Yeah. So, but even
he ends
with
up
Gigolo,
doing good at the end.
Yeah, it's a painful journey to get there. He has to really I think, go through hell and see a lot of upsetting facts about how he was handling his life in order to get there.
And of course,
with the Yakuza, you essentially have like this character that, like, first of all, it's purely because of Robert Mitchum's great performance, because later in his career he was really good at playing like these characters at the sunset of the life with regret. Just again, so many actors don't get enough credit from back then, but Robert Mitchum just took this character, and you could just feel all sort of like the mistakes he's made, and he's just like, I don't want to, be this shitty guy anymore. And then it carries through. Have you seen that movie?
The Yakuza? No.
You have to see
that
movie.
On my list.
It's really interesting because it's a complete inversion of like the normal thing Schrader's trying to prove, because Sidney Pollack didn't want to have like this dreary negative character, right, that like had something awful to say about like a darker aspect of humanity. He wanted to define like this sort of ethereal spiritual connection between different cultures and different people, because they are connecting over shared aspects of the feeling of wanting to be like larger than an individual, right?
Yeah.
Like that sort of kindred shit. And it's almost like Pollack tried to answer a lot of the existential crises that Schrader addresses.
Right.
And
it's interesting when with filmmakers taking writers and directors who have a very distinct vision like Schrader's, and then taking their own take on it. Like, I think True Romance and Natural Born Killers, very different than anything Tarantino would make or use with those characters. I mean, True Romance it takes a much more sentimental and hopeful view of the characters, and Natural Born Killers is more just like, yeah, these guys are just fucked up. These guys are not good. These guys shouldn't be like shouldn't be celebrated in any sort of way.
It's just terrible. Yeah, but Schrader,
compared to, like,
I think,
the Romance.
early in
of
his
the
career.
whole
And the
thing.
same thing with like Peter Weir, right? He took Schrader's character and just found this charisma
Hmm.
in it that I think is again really fascinating. Because I
He's
mean,
an awful human being, but he's so determined that you want to stick with that character.
yeah, but if you think about it, it's like Schrader, without realizing it, I think has definitely commented on like what does it mean when you have someone who's like living all of these beliefs
Right.
and has all these convictions and just embodies them, and how people who are in that same place sort of idolize him, right?
Hmm.
And so in some
I
sort of
mean,
twisted way, I think like Peter Weir laid out in a plainer, sort of easier to digest way why someone like Travis Bickle is so influential and like resonating with like a bunch of people.
go on TikTok, look up Sigma Male, find a million videos of Travis Bickle with funk
Exactly.
music over it.
Exactly. And it's something where I think I don't know if Schrader understands why that resonates with people, right?
Yeah.
Because I think he definitely understands what it means to be that person.
Hmm.
But I think, like,
Well, that's the
same
thing.
thing with like
The way he,
Scorsese, right? I think the people idealizing them, I think, kind of may have caught them off guard.
yeah, I fucking Wolf of Wall Street is the entire point of that movie is basically a satirization of the hustler and like the Andrew Tate culture,
Hmm.
and you got the hustler Andrew Tate type guys making using videos, taking clips from Wolf of Wall Street. Same thing can be said about Goodfellas. Same thing can be said about any of Scorsese's films. Maybe
And
that's
the same,
because Scorsese isn't as vocally critical as someone like Schrader is of the
yeah.
characters.
But I think you couldn't get such a character that resonates with people if someone like Schrader hadn't been as critical as he was. Because Schrader just showed him as ugly as he is. Like, it did not hold back.
Hmm.
He did not try and censor him.
All right,
But it's because of how like palpably powerful it is that there's so many people that just go like, "Oh my god!" Like
resonate with that character.
yeah, I resonate with that character, and you couldn't have that resonance if you tried to tone him back. But then that's why I think the Yakuza and Mosquito Coast are so interesting to me, because it's the most interesting interpretations of Schrader's characters, I think, that deviate from what he was initially, I think, trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think Schrader likes to write a character that you can't instantly go something's off, right?
Yeah,
Yes and no,
but
but
I think that's kind of just how he does write the characters. Because in that Criterion documentary, he talks about Travis Bickle a tiny bit, but the way he talks about Travis Bickle is like he's a guy he knows almost. Like he talks about Travis Bickle like he's a person. It's like, oh, that's Travis. This is like because I think he does have these characters three dimensionally put into his head.
I mean,
I guess you
I don't,
have to if you're making character pieces like that. But
I don't know if he likes to write a character that deceives the audience up front.
hmm.
I think he likes to strip a lot of the layers and just show the journey that way, as opposed to like
Right,
revealing the character.
right,
It's because like if he's like I think Schrader likes to start and sort of like this honest point where it's like, okay, here's the character, right? I'm not going to
right.
conceal anything about them for you, and that way we can follow their journey. Whereas I think Peter Weir definitely deceived the viewers,
Yeah.
and I think
I
he
mean, I
did
thought he was a pretty cool character until he started murdering people.
exactly. Exactly, but it's like, I don't think Schrader would have ever tried to hidden that aspect of that character.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it interesting to me, because that's a sort of a choice that I don't think Schrader would ever do. In the same way that, like, I don't think Schrader would make a character depicted in the Yakuza where, like, they have, like, that very romantic, noble aspect, and that's not Schrader's MO.
Right.
But it isn't something that isn't in his characters. It's not that his characters aren't capable of that. It's just that that's not what he like. It's not what he sees.
Right.
It's not where he's focusing. But that doesn't make it an illegitimate interpretation, which is why I love other people handling his scripts just as much as I love him doing it himself, because it's such a valuable way to get a read on an artist, where it's like, what do they want to say and what do people see, I think is really fascinating. And it's great that Schrader is such an assertive and bold artist, because it allows for such a stark ability to analyze something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think that's a pretty good point to uh, start to wrap this up, get to a
mhm,
conclusion,
I
because
agree.
because we could keep talking for 10 more hours, because
We
there is so
could.
much to analyze. I think that's what makes Schrader such an interesting artist.
Yeah,
Uh,
I feel bad because I
I
haven't.
couldn't go this in depth into fucking Edgar Wright or
No, I
anybody.
well, that's why I feel bad, because Schrader's not even like normally as much as on my radar as like other artists who I could just start gushing about, because I
Yeah,
definitely want to talk.
imagine if we did a Peter Weir episode.
Oh well, Peter Weir is so interesting. Yeah, see,
There you go. Did
yeah,
Peter?
we.
Did,
My gosh, if you asked me like, hey, do you want to do a Kurosawa episode? That would go 6 hours.
Jeez, yeah. I've only seen one Kurosawa movie, so
You've only seen one Kurosawa
I've
movie?
only seen seven. I've only seen Seven Samurai.
Right now, I am rewatching all of his films so I can do short reviews of every single movie.
You should do that. Or let me
Yeah,
get
no,
do that. Don't make it one of the projects that you just like. I'm never gonna do that.
well, no,
Do
I
that. That'd be cool.
watched 5 movies yesterday. I'm rewatching them today. No, it's literally, it's like 3 to 5 minute reviews. I'm not even necessarily going to be reviewing each movie. I'll be talking about relevant things that, like, because like with his first one, I'm like, okay, it perfectly encapsulates that not only was he a bald artist, but he was going to be at war with the studio system his entire career. Stuff like that, where like I can just talk about something relevant, either specifically about like the plot of the film or just like how it relates to Kurosawa.
Yeah, that's my problem. Whenever I start writing down like what I think is gonna be a quick review of something, uh, it quickly goes to 20 pages, and I just keep ranting about every single little thing in it.
Yeah,
What the movie's about, what the movie's saying, is the director good or not? It just it's
well, like
becomes
for
the whole
example,
thing.
Seven Samurai. What I want to talk. Okay, I would just leave this in sort of like this is
Let's
a
leave
trailer
this at
for the
this.
videos I'm making. If someone got this far, then like, yeah, please watch this, because here's the bit. What I want to talk about with Seven Samurai is that I think up to that point in Kurosawa's career, he had been moving on this trajectory of being incredibly impassioned and forceful,
Hmm.
but not nuanced.
Yeah,
Kurosawa just did not have nuance in the sense of a maturity in the calm moments.
right.
Um, it's not that he doesn't have calmer moments in his films earlier, but the way he was able to relate to characters' emotions was when they're most impassioned, is when they're most emotional, right? It's when everything boils to the surface. But that's not
Like
how
that
Seven
scene
Samurai.
where that one guy freaks out
Yeah,
at all the samurai. I
yeah,
forget the name of the character, but it's
mhm,
a very striking scene.
yeah, that was how Kurosawa handled characters before. But I mean, like when you watch Seven Samurai, so many of the other characters have this maturity where you're not even seeing them necessarily go on a character arc, but you
Hmm.
just get this read and this depth that they're a full nuanced person, and you can understand their emotions without Kurosawa having to have that boil over moment, have that strong moment where someone like snaps or someone has an impassioned rant, right?
Right.
And that's really interesting because it completely changes how he was able to approach a lot of his humanist pieces. But I don't want to go off on too much of a
Yeah,
tangent.
they'll be coming the Kira Kurosawa, D and Grant talking about Kira Kurosawa. Yeah, no, let's not even just start joking about other ones because we're just gonna keep going.
Well, no,
Uh,
I wanted to get that off my chest because I definitely will be making those videos. I plan to upload them in November. That's my plan.
Sweet.
Yeah, there's 31 at least
They're
because well, Kurosawa made
cool.
31 movies. I've seen
Yeah.
all of them.
Oh, you already have. Okay,
Yeah, I'm
let's not keep going. We're falling into the trap again. Uh,
I've seen all of them. So yeah, definitely I am looking forward to doing more talks with you. There's so many directors I would want to talk about.
uh,
Uh,
any last words we have on Schrader?
on Schrader,
Yeah,
uh follow his Facebook.
he's the best. Yeah, we didn't even get that much into drama, but yeah, yeah, I love Paul Schrader. He's one of my favorite filmmakers alive, and yeah, I hope that JFK movie gets made because Master Gardener's his last movie. That'll be depressing.
One of my favorite directors dead.
Did did no, okay. Master Gardener wasn't that good. I didn't. That was a disappointing movie, but yeah, love Schrader. This was a great talk. Grant,
Thank you.
GF
Looking forward to more.
Savages. Yep.
Please subscribe to my channel, subscribe to my channel, subscribe to my channel.
Tell them what the channel's called.
GF Savages.
There we go.
Link it. Or you're
I'll
not gonna
link it,
link it.
motherfucker. I'll link. I'm gonna play the entire background track is just gonna be your theme song
Thank you.
the entire time.
On
It'll be
loop.
annoying. It'll just say GF Savages.
Okay.
These
Okay,
are
we've
really-
definitely fallen into the trap. Press stop now.
Okay, stop it.
Now.
Oh,
Now. 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 Press it now.